Let's pull on the thing. So I think you'll agree if you were one. There we go. Or reluctantly agree if you weren't one, that there was really no better time to be a teenager than the 1980s. You had this sort of day-glow childish permissiveness from the White House on down. And I think the best part was that we got to see the world before and after the internet, before and after cable TV, before and after cell phones, before and after video games. And musically, we still had some punk, but now we had new wave, and we had heavy metal, and we had glam rock, and we had British invasion, and we had super pop, and all these things. There was just no way to not be able to choose something to define you, because there was a ton of it. Not all of it was good, but there was a lot of it. So the closest I ever came to being in a sorority was when I joined high school swim team from age 13 to 17. I joined swim team the same month that MTV debuted on cable TV. So between these two things, we on the team were bonded into this ferociously solid sisterhood, because we, from boyish, tiny little girls to full-blown sex-having bombshell women, all plunged ourselves into this common water and pushed ourselves to the point of exhaustion. And then we all suddenly had these musicians and these acts that we all were watching all the time on TV. And it was a time when suddenly these musicians had to start being good looking as well as just play instruments. And we were at full hormonal flux while this was happening. And I think the grand, libidinous, wet, estrogen and adrenaline-fueled fulcrum of all of this could be summed up in two words. It's actually just one word twice: Duran Duran. So Duran love was trickier there at the beginning than it might have been. If you were a girl, you loved Duran Duran, and that was just it. It was just a question of how much. You had like ovaries and menstruation, and you loved Duran Duran. And if you were if you were a guy, especially in a small conservative town like mine, it was a little more difficult. You really had to claim total indifference, or you could say, well, I like the girls on film video. Or you could say, well, I admire the guys as musicians. But you had to reel it back in a little bit. There were guys at the concerts, but they claimed they were there, to support their girlfriends. And as a girl, you loved Duran Duran, obviously, but then you had to choose which Duran did you love the most. And this was super important because it would help define your whole identity. And it was sort of also a trap, especially if you were among one of the beta members of a girl gang or swim team like I was. So you didn't pick Andy. Nobody picked Andy. And if you're like, oh, no, you're remembering wrong. Andy was like the Ringo of the group. I had to actually look up Andy's name. That's how much nobody picked Andy. Simon was the obvious choice, but he was almost too obvious. Like, he was picking Simon, you were kind of playing it a little too safe. And if you were a good girl and you wanted to be seen as such, you could pick Simon. But it's almost like you were voting quorum. Like, if you were a diehard fan, you almost had to pick Nick or John. So John Taylor and Nick Rhodes, you could, strangely in the case of those two, pick both of them, and a lot of people did. But then that was kind of ostracizing, because it's like, are you going to marry two people? No, pick one. So although there was no wrong answer, I'm going to go with the answer chosen by the coolest and most senior and most unabashedly Duran insane of our swim team, a girl named Jana, who picked John Taylor. So I'm going to go ahead and say, between 1981 and 84, John Taylor was the correct choice. And then after that, I think it could change to Nick Rhodes. So one of the things that you had to, actually, you know what? Let me tell you a little bit about Jana first. I think it's important. Jana, to just look at her as maybe an adult or someone that didn't know her very well, you would just think she's a normal-looking girl. She looked kind of like a young Laura Dern, athletic, maybe with a few more piercings than was usual at that time, but she was terrifying. She was one of those people that if I had not been on swim team with her, I would have never, ever dared speak to her or ever make eye contact with her. There was, you know that movie trope where somebody, there's a beer bottle and they smash it and then there's going to be a fight? She's the only person that I've ever seen actually do that in real life. It was probably Pepsi or Squirt or something, but it was still, that shit, when you see it happen in real life, the fight is over. People cannot wrap their heads around what they just saw. So you go like this, you go like, break, and they're like, what, no. Nope. My own pick, I'm pretty proud of. It was Roger the drummer, and it was really John Taylor, Simon, and then Nick. But I picked Roger politically, and I'm proud of it, because none of the alpha girls had Roger as their first pick. He was cute enough to not be Andy. And this is the real reason. I figured that when I finally met the band, that Roger would be so flattered that I had picked him as my favorite instead of the usual Simon, Nick, and John, that I would get like a gratitude makeout. I truly believe this. So from there, you had your favorite. The way that you would then show your Duran love was to describe a fantasy scenario of what would happen when you and your Duran finally did get together. And in our group of girls, you would sing Duran Duran songs out loud on the bus chosen by Jana. So Jana knew all the words to all the songs, but her position as our leader was, unchallenged, so she tolerated just the hits. And this was almost a problem for me because I did not sing. I could not sing. It had been pointed out to me and confirmed many times in my young life thus far. And can we actually, at that, just confirm that Happy Birthday is a bullshit song to have to sing? It's that second birthday. And I think that's probably a pretty common sort of sadness from adolescence on, is that wish to have a beautiful singing voice and just not having one. Because it's usually something you learn from other people, and it's wanting to create something beautiful and being not allowed to. And I think it's just kind of, I think it's also why we get such sick, evil gratification from watching things like really bad American Idol auditions, where you're just watching and you're like, yeah, you think you're great, but fuck you. You suck and the whole nation knows it now. So I found a dodge to this problem because my high school drama teacher liked to, before he cast a musical, liked to show us video of them. For example, Gypsy, or for example, Annie, Get Your Gun, or for example, Anything Goes, all of which feature Ethel Merman, a nasally girl's guardian angel. Now, I could not sing, but I could sing like Ethel Merman. And through that, I discovered that even though my own voice still couldn't hit that second birthday, if I sang like certain other people, it would be passable. Like, it wouldn't be destroying the song. And it would be kind of jokey, but it would amuse the older girls on swim team in the back of the bus, and that was all that really mattered. So I did sort of like a Roy Orbison Elvis-y one, which would be, mouth is alive, juice is like wine, and I'm hungry like the wolf. Thank you very much. Or Cyndi Lauper, which is really just Betty Boop. Cherry ice cream smile, I suppose it's very nice. Or even, on occasion, in limited doses, Miss Ethel Agnes Merman herself. Just a back off mic. Don't say the prayer for me now. Sing it till the morning after. Oh! So then Jana would be like, oh, Daria, ha, 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 and I'd be like, ah, and then I would do it for her on command whenever her whim dictated, which was all the time. So like in the halls, passing at school, in a Village Inn or Denny's after the meet, and then always, always, always on the bus. She graduated, and I stayed on swim team for a while, but Duran love didn't diminish any, so I'm sure there's quite a lot of bus drivers in their 70s and 80s that have like weird Duran associations and don't know why. So the second part, the fantasy part, usually would take place on bus rides home, whispered in the dark, or more often it would take place with most to all of us gathered in a shared motel room with MTV on in the background, and the understanding that if a Duran video came on, we would all fall silent. And then we'd pick up the fantasies again with renewed vigor. And throughout all the stories, Jana would just sort of sit there listening and smoking, and then she would just win. So it would, like a junior or something, would be like, okay, so it's London. I'm in London, and I'm not at a concert or anything. I'm like outside an apartment. I'm outside a flat. And like Simon walks by and he's wearing like, no one can tell it's him because he's wearing like a hat and sunglasses, and I have this like dresser thing. And he says he'll help me move it into the flat. So he's like on one end and I'm on the other, and he's moving it. And then we're in the thing and he like pushes the dresser, like, so I'm kind of almost putting against the wall, right? Oh my God. And then, so then I'm there and he like crawls across the top of the dresser toward me like he does in the thing. And then he's like right there. And then we're like kissing. Oh my God. And he like doesn't have the hat or sunglasses on. Oh my God. And then Jana would go like this. I meet John Taylor in a bar and I let him fuck me from behind till my pussy falls off. That is such a fan. So, in his autobiography, Nerd Do Well, Simon Pegg talks about how he wishes that he had a time machine so he could go back to his young self as a geeked out boy and have the pleasure of telling his younger self all the wonderful, amazing things he was going to do and the experiences he was going to be able to have and the people he was going to be able to meet. And I had a time machine moment. I did end up getting to interview Duran Duran before a show they did here, but that, surprisingly, was not it. 20 years and 15 months after Duran Duran released their third studio album, Seven and the Ragged Tiger, featuring New Moon on Monday and The Reflex and Union of the Snake, on March 14th, 2003, members of local bands Heat Miser and King Black Acid and singer-songwriter James Angel were going to be performing one show at the Aladdin Theater on 13th and Powell, and they were going to have John Taylor from Duran Duran join them on guitar. So they needed a female MC who could wear a mermaid costume. And I was one. And I had one. So it's the night of the show, and I talked to everybody in the band, and I was like, had all this like fake mermaid hair, and my boobs are up in the thing, and I've got all these sparkly scales and stuff, and I'm like, 15 years younger, and I feel just fine, like I'm feeling fine, and the band's playing, and so there's nothing for me to do at the moment. So the stage setup at the Aladdin is coincidentally exactly the same as the stage in my old high school. So I did what I used to do when my more vocally blessed classmates were on stage performing Annie Get Your Gun or Anything Goes or Gypsy. And I went to the, the right-hand side of the stage in sort of one of two walkway wings. And I stood right at the top and just sort of peeked out at the audience and just quietly was watching and just being caught up in the moment. And I sort of noticed that on the stage, James Angel is now just doing an acoustic thing by himself. And then I feel someone coming up behind me. And I feel someone put their hand right here on my shoulder. And then I feel someone put like the side of their head, sort of like part of their chin and their cheek, leaning against this shoulder. And it's John Taylor. And he smells fantastic. So I'm standing here like this. And my heart is like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I'm thinking to myself, like, don't move, Daria, and don't sing. So John, who I still haven't even seen, I'm just this presence, tiny. And so he kind of lifts his chin off my shoulder, and there's this little poof of silver sparkles, which was part of my mermaid outfit. Just kind of appear. And he moves in towards my ear until his Duran Duran lips are touching my ear. And he says, I like to do this too. And I go, what? What the fuck? What is he talking about? We like to do this thing. And then I realized he's talking about watch the audience without being seen. But even like realizing that, I'm still like, okay, so what's happening? Am I in high school? Because like I swam and now I'm a mermaid and maybe I'm dead and in heaven because there's like a fucking angel on stage and things are going and I've got the queens and he's small and Cologne and Rio. But I have to say that with all of that, the chaos and the experience and the thing and the memory and the one thought is at a constant above all the rest, louder than anything else, very calm and very steady, running on a loop inside my head. And this is what it was. Bottle. Fuck you, Jim!